Hi everyone, welcome to our new course Introduction to NotebookLM. NotebookLM is a research assistant powered by Gemini 1.5 Pro and launched by Google. NotebookLM has taken the internet by storm and is now being used for all sorts of use cases such as generating audio podcasts, which is a very interesting and viral feature today. In this course, we're going to dive into what are the best practices for how to use this powerful research assistant called NotebookLM. We will touch on a variety of use cases and compelling ways on how to use NotebookLM in the workplace and for a lot of interesting personal projects. Do stay tuned for all our demos and exercises. I am the instructor for this course. My name is Elvis and I'm the CEO
Here's
of
a little
Dear.ai.
bit of information about myself. My name is Elvis Arabia. I'm the co-founder of Dear.ai, where we mostly focus on professional services and helping AI startups with developing with large language models and generative AI. I have been an NLP researcher for the last 10 years, and my main focus has been on information retrieval systems and language models. I'm also an independent AI researcher. I've worked with teams such as Elastic, Meta AI, Papersy Code, Fear, PyTorch, and many other AI startups. As I mentioned earlier, I do a lot of technical AI consulting, mostly with AI startups. I am very passionate about delivering professional technical trainings such as this one. You can find me on X at Omar
Here are the
Sar0.
objectives of this course. You will learn how to effectively use NotebookLM as a research assistant. We will cover best practices and provide all sorts of tips and tricks on how to make the most out of NotebookLM for your personal and professional use cases. You will also learn how to unlock unique and advanced use cases with NotebookLM. We cover a wide range of projects in this course, from generating podcasts for newsletters to generating quizzes, exercises, and additional notes for students using Google Slides presentations. Here's the structure for this course. We're going to get started with NotebookLM, slowly get you familiarized with the tool and the different features available. Then we are going to present different use cases and examples. So for instance, how do you analyze PDFs and what you can do with that? Then we're going to touch on probably one of the most popular ways on how NotebookLM is being used today, which is audio overviews, how you can generate audio overviews and what you can do with that. Then we will cover an interesting use case for how to analyze YouTube videos and chat with those YouTube videos. Similarly to how you can chat with PDFs, that's a feature that's also supported in NotebookLM. And finally, we're going to provide you an example of how to work with slides. So how to add Google Slides as a source and demonstrate some of the capabilities such as image understanding, understanding of tables, and different things that you can do with those slides. In the end, we really want to give you a comprehensive set of use cases and ideas for how you might use NotebookLM on a day-to-day basis. We're going to start slowly. So we will show you first how to create your first notebook and then go through some of the features that are offered in NotebookLM. Later down the road, we are going to do deeper dives into the functionalities and some use cases that you can start to experiment with. Our hope is that it inspires you to be able to use it in your personal life and also your professional work. So to get started, you need to go to notebooklm.google.com. I'll provide a link down below so you can access that, create an account, use a Google account. There are some restrictions for what's allowed to access NotebookLM. You have to follow the instructions in the link that I'm providing. Once you have set up an account, then you are presented with the following screen. So once you're getting started, the first thing you see is create your first notebook. So I don't have any notebooks here that I've created so far, but I do see some example notebooks. Now I will highly recommend you to go and look at the introduction to NotebookLM before you get started. And the reason is because there's a lot of great documentation here that they have posted in this NotebookLM. So the Google team has done a really good job to document how you may use NotebookLM, what are the limitations, and so forth. In the course, we will provide you ideas, as I mentioned, how to use NotebookLM for different use cases and different kinds of documents that you may have around. And we will also go through some best practices and we'll also follow some of the recommendations from the Google team. We'll go back to NotebookLM and start from the front page. And then we're going to create our first notebook. So we can go here, create, and we're presented with this screen. Everything about NotebookLM is centered around sources. The idea is that it will provide its sources and then you can use the Gemini model to interact with those sources. That's kind of the idea at a high level. Gemini 1.5 Pro. This is one of their best models available, and so it's a very powerful model that we can take advantage of to do all sorts of creative tasks around some of the sources that we have lying around. Sources can be audio files, can be Markdown documents, can be PDF, Google Docs, Google Slides, websites, YouTube, and even notes that you can paste as text. So those are the types of sources that are supported by NotebookLM. So what you need to do is you can drag a file here if you have one, or you can use one of the options below. We're going to go through all these different options throughout the course, so don't worry about that right now. For this very simple getting started section, we're going to add two sources. So recently, Google DeepMind released this very interesting work called AlphaChip, and as a researcher or an AI researcher, I'm very interested in this work. And most of the times, I really don't have time to go through some of these announcements. So my plan is to use NotebookLM to give me a quick overview about what this launch was about. What is AlphaChip about? Why are people so excited about this particular announcement? So I'm going to give it some sources. I have two web pages that I'm going to add as source to NotebookLM. The first one is this article by Google DeepMind on AlphaChip and how it transformed computer chip designing. Right, so this one was released 26th of September 2024. Right, so this whole thing here, instead of copying and pasting it to NotebookLM, I can just provide it the link. And that's what I'm about to do. So copy the link to the web page and then paste it over to NotebookLM. Now I am in NotebookLM and I have that link copied, and now I'm going to paste it here. So the option here to paste links are two options: YouTube and a website. We're going to touch on YouTube later on in the course. So I'm going to go and copy over my next URL. Again, I'm providing the URLs below this video. I'm going to add another source, so I can go here to this plus sign, and then I can choose website, and then I can paste my second source. So this one is an addendum that was provided as part of this announcement. This addendum was published in Nature, so it provides more information about what are the updates on this particular announcement, because this is something that was previously released and there are a lot of new things here. And that's what I want to find out. What are the new things? What is exciting about this particular announcement? And note that you have some notes here. Only the visible text on the website will be imported at this moment. Paid articles are not supported, so do pay attention to that. We're going to insert this, and now you'll see it's being added here. All right, so we have two sources, and actually we can add up to 50 sources per a notebook. And notice I mentioned notebook. So this is a notebook that I've created, and the notebook has a name as well. So here is a name. So far it's untitled, but I'm going to rename this to AlphaChip Research. So that's going to be the name of my notebook. Okay, now it's going to be saved as that. Just to show you that it actually saved it, I'm going to go back to the home page. I can just click here on the logo, and it takes me to the front page. This is my dashboard. So I have the example notebooks, and I also have this AlphaChip Research notebook that I've just created. And I can continue to create new notebooks. I'm going to click on it again, and you will see that it has the two sources. So those were saved automatically. And from here, we have a bunch of options. And this is where the fun actually starts. So after we added our sources, we can do a few things. We can add a note. So the first thing I want to show you here is how to add a note. So there is this option right here. As of the time of this recording, which is October the 1st, we can add up to 1,000 notes. These notes could be written by you, or it could be as well notes that correspond to responses that you get from the model. I'll show you that step later when we are using the chat option available in NotebookLM. Just to show you how this works, I'm going to type something here and save a note. I'm going to say researching, could be anything, researching about the new release of the Alpha chip model by Google DeepMind. Okay, very simple note, nothing too fancy here. And I can give it a title. I'll just say research. Purpose, that's it. I just wanted to show you how to add a note. And this is referred to as a written note here. And you can add styling if you want, that's your choice. But I'll leave it as is for now. So that's saved automatically. And I could do a few things with these notes, and I'll show you some interesting things that you can do. But because this is a very simple note, I'm going to skip that step and then show you later on in the course the things that you can do with notes and how you can engage with them and interact with them and do all sorts of conversions and analysis on these written notes. So the fun part of NotebookLM is this notebook guide. So I'm going to click on this notebook guide here at the bottom, and what you see here is a bunch of options. So when I uploaded these sources, it's giving me the option to create a FAQ, study guide, table of contents, timeline, briefing doc. Those are referred to as pre-formatted guides. Those are a good starting point. It also gives you a summary of what these sources are talking about. And then it has this feature which everyone is talking about, which is this audio overview, which is basically a deep dive conversation involving two hosts, and it's English only, about the sources that you have passed it. And what I like about audio overview is super engaging. As you will see, we'll go through many examples of how to use it later in the course. So stay tuned for that. But just to show you that you can generate audio overview here, I will just click on this button and you will see here that it's saying generating conversation. This might take a few minutes. No need to stick around. So you can do other things while you wait for your audio overview. We will have a specific section on audio overview and we will do a deeper dive on this and some tips on how to use this feature. And you will see that we have the audio overview generated now and you can play it. So I'll play a few seconds just to demonstrate what was the audio overview of the Alpha chip announcement.
All right, buckle up, because we're diving into some seriously cool tech today. AI that designs the brains of computers. We're talking about AlphaChip, a system from Google DeepMind that's changing the game for chip design. You've sent us a couple of articles on this, and let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
It really is fascinating stuff. To understand why this is such a big deal, we need to start with what a chip layout actually is. Imagine a city plan, but instead of buildings and streets, it's transistors and circuits. Millions, even billions of them, all packed onto a tiny chip.
Okay, so like a micro-metropolis with its own crazy traffic flow. And designing these layouts, that's where it gets really complicated, right?
Exactly. It's a painstaking process that hasn't fundamentally changed in decades. Skilled engineers spend weeks, sometimes months, meticulously placing each component to optimize performance. And this reliance on human brainpower, it's actually created a bottleneck in chip development.
So enter AlphaChip, the AI that designs AI chips. It's like AI making itself smarter, right?
It does have a certain elegance to it. Essentially, they've trained AlphaChip to approach chip design as a game. Imagine a blank grid representing the chip. AlphaChip gets to place the components one by one like pieces on a game board, and it receives rewards based on how efficient the final layout is.
So it's learning by playing, figuring out the best moves based on the feedback it gets.
Precisely. But here's where it gets really interesting.
So I played a minute and a half there just to demonstrate what the feature is. But later, we're going to go through a deeper dive on this feature and other things that you can do with NotebookLM. So there is also these suggested questions. And these questions are based on the sources as well. So everything for the notebook is centered around the sources. So you can ask a simple question, you can select one, and once you select one, for instance, I can choose this one. What are the key ways AlphaChip has revolutionized computer chip design? I'll click on that and notice that now it takes me into this chat mode. And now it's generating a response. Okay, after a few seconds there, it generated this response here. And I can continue to have a conversation with it with some of the suggested follow-up questions down below. And there is a lot more here that we can explore. But I want to keep it at that for now. But hopefully you see how exciting this is and how powerful this can be as a research assistant. So stay tuned for more as we go through deeper dives into all the features, functionalities, going through use cases, and very compelling ways on how to use NotebookLM for personal and professional AI engineering work. But I also do a lot of AI research work. So I'm both an engineer and a researcher. So I do read a ton of papers. And one of the ways that I've been using NotebookLM is to act as a research assistant to help me stay up to date with the AI research that I'm interested in. And I think this is a very interesting use case because NotebookLM can read sources and also understand PDF documents. At the end of the day, it's using Gemini 1.5 Pro, and I already used that model to do a lot of really complex analysis on research papers. I'm interested in using NotebookLM to help me stay up to date some of the latest developments around AI research concepts that I'm interested in. So in this section, I'm going to show you how I use NotebookLM as an AI research assistant. So the first thing I need to do is I need to create a new notebook. I'm going to create that here. And then I'm going to add my sources. This will be for every new notebook I create. It's always going to ask me to add sources. In fact, sources is a requirement for a notebook. You cannot really interact with the notebook or use the chat function or generate audio overviews if you don't have sources. The source I'm going to use in this demo is a PDF. Most of the papers come in a PDF format. So that's the format that I'm going to be using this time. So I'm going to choose File, and then I'm going to select my research paper. As someone that keeps track of prompt engineering techniques, I've been reading this paper called Meta Prompting, or I'm interested in reading it. And so I would love to use NotebookLM to help me get a better understanding of what this is.
So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to open it. And you can see that it's uploading, and it uploads really quickly. I can actually click on it, and you'll see that it has already uploaded this for me. And what I get here is a source guide. So I get the summary for it, and I also get key topics that are discussed in this paper. So that's really interesting, right? Because I can click on those, and I can drill down into whatever topic I want. So let's do that as an example. So I'm going to click on, let's say, something like reasoning tasks. And notice that it says discuss reasoning tasks. So those are pre-formatted chats that you can use, because when you click on it, it is submitted here as a prompt as part of this chat. And now I get a drill down on the reasoning tasks. So just in case you're lacking inspiration and you want to drill down into what this work is about, this particular research paper, you can literally just click on buttons and use those pre-formatted topics, questions, and even the guides that are available for you here in the notebook guide section. So I'm going to close this one. I'm going to name my notebook. That's something that you have to get used to. Maybe this changes in the future, but for now, you have to do this manually. Ideally, this should be automatic, but let's just add a name for it. I'm going to call this meta prompting and paper analysis. Okay, meta prompting. And I can do all the regular stuff. I can add notes. I can even add more sources here. This is something that we are going to be experimenting with in future demonstrations in this course. And now I can do a bunch of things with this particular research paper that I've uploaded. I can do the audio overview, but I'm actually going to leave this part for a specific section that I have coming later down the road in the course. So I'm going to skip this for now. But what I will do is I'm actually going to click on one of the suggested questions. I really like the suggested questions because they are pre-configured for you to start this exploration of whatever this research paper is about. I think this is a really powerful feature. So the one I'm going to select here is, let me see what makes more sense. All right, so it says, how does meta prompting differ from fuchsia prompting in terms of structure, application, and effectiveness in solving complex reasoning tasks? I think that's a very interesting one. And as a researcher, I want to know the difference. Maybe this gives me an idea on what meta prompting is all about and why so many people are excited about it and why people are talking about it. I'm going to click on that, and you can see that now it prompts the model here in the chat window. You can see the question here. And now the model is generating a response. Okay, so we have a response from the model. It's a very lengthy response. And obviously, what we can do here is we can ask the model to shorten it. But we're not going to do that. That's something that you can try on your own. It provides a title here, or like a heading, meta prompting versus fuchsia prompting, structure, application, and effectiveness. Quite comprehensive in the response. And this is something that you have to kind of get used to with these language models. They tend to be very verbose. They, by default, want to generate very long responses. So it's your job to be able to know how to prompt these models to give you shorter responses, more concise. If that's what you want, then you have to prompt the model to do that. But we haven't really asked the model to do that yet. Okay, so here's the breakdown, and it basically tells me this is the structure. So meta prompting is like this. It gives me a definition of it, and then it has all these citations as well. We'll go through that later. Then it has the application of it. Application of it will help me better understand it. And notice that for each of these sections, it does have a bit about fuchsia prompting, and that should help me differentiate between these two concepts or these two prompting techniques. Or that's the idea, I believe. So it says the sources highlight that meta prompting emphasizes on structure and syntax, makes it well suited for interacting with symbolic systems and code environments, which are crucial for complex reasoning tasks. So let's go through one of the citations here. I'm going to pick this last one here since I already read this out. And if you hover over it, it gives you an explanation, but you really cannot tell where and in which part of the paper this is. So to get a better sense of that, you can click on the citation itself, and then it will take you directly where that is located in the paper. So this is how the paper has been extracted from the PDF. So you see the actual text where this particular statement was pulled from. So that's really nice to be able to know the source of truth, because that's how you verify whether this is a correct statement or if the model is just making it up. But one thing about NotebookLM that I've noticed from my own experimentation is that it's usually not hallucinating, and usually because it's forced to use citation, it almost always gives you correct statements or truthful statements. And I really like the citation feature because of that. You can always validate that. And that's how you would use the citation feature. And what I can do here now
as I continue doing this research, I can actually save this as a note. So I'm going to save to note right here. And you can see that now it's saved as a note. I can actually go here and change the name of it. Again, ideally, this should be done by the LLM or can be done by the LLM, can be automated. But for now, we have to do this manually. So I will say meta prompting versus few shot prompting. There we go. So that's our little note right there, which is a saved response note. Notice that it's different from our note that we write manually. And one thing you'll note about these saved response notes is that they only show you 10 citations, right? So you only get 10. But in reality, this whole node has up to 11 citations here. You will see that this one has 11 citations. So the notes shows 10. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you don't see all the citations, you only see up to 10. So 10 is the limit there from what you see in the note preview. But here, when you go into the chat, you see the full list of citations. Something that you can also do is you can go to the actual document here or the research paper. If you are reading through this, you can also save those as notes. So this is typically how you would save notes if you're like reading a book or something like that. So let's say I wanted to actually save the abstract as a note, as an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this entire abstract. I think it finishes right here. And then notice that some suggestions are mentioned here. And one of those suggestions is to add to note. So the selected text will be added as a note. That's another way to create a note. That's really cool because sometimes maybe you are reading through this and you found something interesting and you want to make a note of it. This is a very cool feature for that. So instead of like pasting things around and manually creating the note, you can just basically hit this button right here. So let's do that, add to note. And you will see that it was quickly added here as part of my notes. So it says code from meta prompting. In fact, I'm going to change that and I'm just going to say abstract. So now it's explicit that this is the abstract. And this is how I continue to analyze the paper and try to understand the paper better. One thing I also do with any paper that I'm reading is I would like to know what the contributions are. And apparently there are some contributions here, but this is a very lengthy contribution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select it. And then what I can do is I can summarize to notes. This is actually another very useful feature. Something that you can also do while you read the paper, if there's something that's very difficult to understand, you can also use this option here, help me understand. So I'm just going to summarize the contributions and see what the model gives me. So here it's generating a note automatically. So I can open the note and you will see that now it has nicely formatted into bullet points. And it says here are the main takeaways of the passage condensed into bullet points. So it introduces meta prompting first, then it has a theoretical foundation, and then it talks about recursive meta prompting, then it has an experimental validation, and then it has like zero-shot performance, and you can see the performance there. So it's not explicit here that these are contributions. It seems to me this is more like the takeaways from the research paper. And you must understand that if you're not really prompting the model explicitly to give you contributions, then it will give you, or it will take a guess on what you want just based on the selection. So yeah, so maybe it did not really do a good job at the contributions. So one thing I can do now is I can be more specific to the model. So I go to the chat part and I can do that explicitly. This is where the chat actually comes into play. I can go to the chat window here. I know this is selected because by default it's going to be selected. And then I can ask it, what are the contributions of the paper? And in fact, I'm going to say, what are the main contributions of the paper? It could be a lot of contributions, but what are the main ones? And then I'm just going to ask it. And you can see here now it gets into all the details, right? It generates, here are the main contributions of the paper based on the information provided in the sources. The authors propose meta prompting, then it says theoretical framework, then it says distinction from few-shot prompting. There is a lot of comparison with few-shot prompting, apparently. And then meta prompting for prompting tasks and recursive meta prompting as well. So there is another version called recursive meta prompting. And then there is empirical validation of the meta prompting effectiveness. So that was part of the contribution. And then expanding meta prompting to multimodal foundational models as well. So that's also part of the contribution. And again, you can also go back to the citations and you will get the citations for where this particular thing was mentioned. So I can go here and here is where it was mentioned, and I can go to a deeper reading on why this was considered a contribution. So that's how you would typically work on this. And again, what I can do here is I can save this to note. So this will be main contributions. main contributions. Okay, so that's saved. Now this one again wasn't that useful, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it, and I can also delete notes. So I'm just going to delete this one. So this is how you experiment with NotebookLM. Maybe adding notes with the suggested prompts wasn't enough, and in that case I used the chat functionality to generate something more precise. So you have to experiment to see what works best for the data that you are making available to NotebookLM. As a researcher, something that's very common practice if you are from a research lab is that you need to present papers. That's something that you have to get familiar with. So something that you can do here in NotebookLM is you can ask it to summarize something into like a slide. Why not? Let's try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these notes, and then it gives me a bunch of suggestions here. But I don't want any of these suggestions. What I want is I want to actually generate a slide from the content that are in these notes. So I can use the chat functionality for that. Notice that it's saying it has selected 3 notes, and it's going to use those 3 notes specifically to generate the slide that I want. So I'm going to say create one short slide for the concepts mentioned in the notes. Let's see if it follows exactly what I want here. So it says create one short slide for the concepts mentioned in the notes. So this is about those notes. So I just want to create a slideshow, and this is going to be my first slide. Again, these models tend to always want to generate something very long. So you can see again here that even though I'm saying one short slide, it's basically trying to create a slide, yes, because I can see it's formatting things really nicely, but this would be too heavy for a slide. Although I really like how it's summarizing things, it's distinguishing between the few-shot prompting, it's talking about applications. Overall, the structure is really nice, and it's also talking about how effective meta prompting is for complex reasoning. That's kind of where you want to use this. But I think this is too long for a presentation. So what I can do is I can save it to notes, then I can name this. I'll just call it notes per slide. And then what I can do is I can deselect all and then just select this one and then ask it to just summarize that. Maybe it generated a very long response because I gave it too many sources. That could also be the case. But in general, I would say with models like Gemini, they tend to always want to produce very long text. That's something you have to know and something you have to kind of work around and be able to prompt the model better or guide the model better. And that's what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to use this note. You can see that one note is selected. And then I'm going to prompt it again to create a shorter version of this. Create a shorter version of this slide, maximum 3 paragraphs. If I'm more specific, obviously it will help the model. So I'm testing again if I can get a shorter version of that. So I'm iterating, right? And that's kind of a process that you have to get comfortable with when you work with these LLMs. And here you go. This is a much shorter version, and I can get shorter versions of this. I can tell it, just give me 3 sentences or something like that. And so that's how you kind of experiment with NotebookLM and the model and the chat window and the note. Once I'm happy with the results here and happy with my notes, I'm very excited about what I have found. And I could also create my own notes and so on. I could also share this with my lab mates. My lab mates might also be interested in this approach. So if I'm in a research lab, I could also share this with my advisor. I could share this with my research lab mates, and they also get to see what meta prompting is about and learn very quickly what it's about, because I've also already done the work together with NotebookLM. So there is a feature here called Share. So you can click on Share, and this shares basically the notebook. You can select who you want to share with right here. So for instance, I have multiple accounts. I'm sharing it with myself, and you can assign different roles. So you can assign viewer if you only want people to view the notebook and don't change anything, or you can also revoke the access if that's something that you want to do, or you can also set them as an editor. And if you set them as an editor, they will be able to change, add notes and things like that to the notebook. So I'm just going to select viewer, and I'm going to send. I can also just copy the link as well, but viewer is the default role. I can then hit send here, and that will be sent to whoever you added that you wanted to share this notebook with. So that's it for this section. Hopefully you learn a few things on how to take advantage of the notes, how to use the chat feature, how to upload PDF files, and how to interact with the PDF files, taking advantage of the citations to verify the information that the model is producing as well. That's really important when working with LLMs. And I think that's one of the powerful features that I really like about NotebookLM, because you can always just verify answers, and the model tends to hallucinate less. Stay tuned for upcoming sections to see more interesting
Hopefully
use
by
cases. By now, you're seeing how powerful Notebook LM can be as a research assistant and how useful and fun it is to experiment with Notebook LM using all the different functionalities. In this section in particular, we are going to be focusing on one of the most exciting features that has everyone talking about Notebook LM. This is the audio overviews. Some people refer to it as deep dives. I think this is a very exciting feature because it allows you to use your sources to generate audio overviews of those sources. For this particular demonstration, I want to continue with this idea of using Notebook LM as an AI research assistant. It's part of the important work that I do for the scientific community and also the AI community more broadly. And I love using tools like this to help me accelerate thinking and understanding of these concepts and also communicate those to others in the community. As we know, AI is such transformative technology and continues to reach many different places and industries. So it's important to be able to communicate to more people and make all this content more accessible. So I've been thinking, how do I use some of these Notebook LM features to make content more accessible for folks in other industries? And audio overview is such a great feature for that. So I'm going to start a new notebook. And for this one, I actually have a newsletter that I write. So I was just saying that something that I'm very passionate about is communicating about all the scientific and developments and all these breakthroughs that happen in the AI field. That's something that I spend a lot of time on. And I write newsletters, I have my own community, Discord, and I even talk about this stuff in some of the trainings and courses that I develop because I also do a lot of professional training for companies. So it's something that I do on a daily basis. So now I'm starting to use Notebook LM for this type of work. And that's why I'm really excited to talk about Notebook LM and why I have chosen to build a dedicated course for this particular tool. For some of you that know me, I have this very popular newsletter called Top ML Papers of the Week. And in this newsletter, I summarize all the great research papers that are trending, and some of these I also create myself because I think they're interesting for developers and researchers as well. However, this particular newsletter is only available in text format. So I've been thinking, and I've had this idea for some time, to be able to generate audio versions of this particular newsletter. That would be really powerful. This is something that a lot of my subscribers would love, and they continue to ask me for this particular format. I haven't been able to do this, but now I have this tool, Notebook LM, that looks very promising and can help me solve this problem. So I'm going to use audio overviews to generate an audio overview of my newsletter. So I'm back here in Notebook LM. I've started a Notebook LM and I need to upload my sources. So as you saw, I have this newsletter and I have an issue or the latest issue of the newsletter. So I'm going to actually paste a website here. That's what I'm dealing with. That's the type of source. I'm going to paste it here and you can see this is corresponding to the last issue that I posted for my newsletter. I'm going to insert it and it's just going to quickly extract information. So we can always preview what it extracted. So you can see it extracted all of this. It has some information about the date that could be important too. You can see here from September 16 to September 22. And then it has all the different papers that I highlighted. There's 10 different papers, so I can see that all of the papers are here, right? So it's 10. And together with all the links and the tweet source for where this paper was mentioned and discussed on the X platform. So what I want to do with this now is directly feed this to Notebook LM and create an audio overview. I think that'll be powerful, and this is something that I can directly use in future issues of my newsletter. And I think a lot of people that are building newsletters will be excited about this particular use case. So I'm going to generate the audio for this. I'm going to hit generate, and now we need to wait. All right, so the audio overview is finally completed. Keep in mind, it takes a bit of time to generate the audio overview, so just have patience with that, and maybe you can try other features as you wait for the audio overview to complete. But it's finally completed here. So I'm gonna play the audio overview just to give you a little sample of what was generated by Notebook LM.
Okay, strap yourselves in for this deep dive. because we're going to be wading into some pretty mind-blowing stuff about large language models. And let me tell you,
Yeah.
the future is looking, it's looking pretty wild.
Yeah, the rate of progress it's really something else. It's kind of like, remember a little while ago when this was all sci-fi?
It's true.
Now it's all over the news, and like it really makes you think, what's next? What can't AI do?
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this a little.
Mhm.
We're not just talking about, AI that can like spit out a canned response, right? We're
Yeah.
talking about actual like real deal conversation here, like
Yeah.
back and forth,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what this Moshi research, that's what they're trying to do. They call it a full duplex dialogue system, which basically means
Yeah, what does that even mean?
it's like it's supposed to be like a real conversation, right?
Okay, so like natural.
Yeah, natural. Imagine like an AI that can actually, follow the thread, pick up on your cues, and respond in a way that makes sense. Like and and all.
That's a lot harder than it sounds, though. Think about it. Like, when we're just talking to each other, we do so much without even thinking. We're reading each other's tone. Like, are you being serious right now?
Yeah.
Are we joking? We even finish each other.
Sentences. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Moshi's goal is to replicate all of that, which I mean could be huge. Can you imagine what that would do for virtual assistants? Or like customer service?
Dude, no more arguing with robots on the phone. I'm SO here for that.
Okay, I just paused the audio overview. As you can see, the hosts are having a blast and having so much fun. It's super engaging. I can listen to the whole audio overview. And that's really where we are at with AI. Like, it's engaging and I'm learning at the same time. They are talking about Moshi specifically, this particular announcement. Basically, this is a speech text foundation model. You can interact with it, and they're talking about it. They're talking about how exciting it is, right? And they're quite excited about it. And they're also explaining what this particular system is doing and what it is and how it might be used in different use cases. So it is quite impressive what NotebookLM is doing here with this audio review, and it has so much potential. So what you can do with the audio review is you can also share it. So you can go here and you can share this publicly if you want. You can also play it with different speed. So you can change the playback speed to 2x if you don't have too much time. So as you maybe are doing some other task, you can always play this in the background and change the speed if that's something that you like. I usually like to listen to audio at like 1.5x, so that's a pretty useful feature. You can also download it as well. It stores as MP3, I believe. And then you can also delete it and regenerate the audio overview. Something that you will notice with the audio overview, it actually saves with your notebook. So I will go back here and I will show you what I mean. So I'm going to go back to my summarizing newsletter notebook, and then I'm going to open Notebook Guide here. And then you will see that it's generated here. After some time, this disappears. This option is not available to play. And so what you need to do then is you will need to load it. So you get an option to load the generated audio, and it loads it for you because it's the next thing I want to do in this section is I'm going to show you what else I can do with this specific newsletter. So something I do with the newsletter every week that's very time consuming is I actually generate the newsletter for different places. So I cross post this on LinkedIn. I also cross post the newsletter on GitHub as well. We have a GitHub repo for this. And there's a lot of researchers that prefer the GitHub repo. It's much cleaner and they like the formatting there and so on. So I'm going to show you first the GitHub repo. And then what I'm going to tell you is what is the problem that we're trying to solve and how we will use NotebookLM for it. So we are in the ML Papers of the Week GitHub repo. This is under our organization, Dear.ai. And here we highlight again the top ML papers every week. And this is a very popular GitHub repo. It has 10K stars. And there's a lot of people that actually prefer to consume the newsletter in this format. So as an additional service, we try to update the repo and keep it updated as much as possible. But it's a very time-consuming process, I must say. And right now, we haven't really spent the time to automate this, although we probably can automate this process of just extracting the information from the original Substack newsletter and then just sending a pull request here. That's something that we can probably do. But I actually wanted to use NotebookLM for this because while I can use an agent for that, I prefer to do this as a manual process because that way I'm sure that what I'm putting here is the actual thing that is in the newsletter, the actual content. That's really important for me, especially because of the kind of content that I'm posting here. So for every week, again, we're listing all the papers. So let's say we go to September 23 to September 29th. That was the issue that we did last week. You can see here that we have all the papers and it's formatted nicely. So this is Markdown format. So if I click on the edit button, you will see that it's written as a Markdown format. You can see the formatting here. So the task that I'm interested in using NotebookLM for is to convert that Substack newsletter issue into this format. And so the question is, can NotebookLM actually do this for me? If it can, then it basically saves me from doing this work manually, because currently how I do it is I copy over the explanation of the paper. I have to do the little editing here as well, the formatting. Then I have to paste the links. It takes a bit of time. It almost takes like 10 to 15 minutes. And in fact, I think NotebookLM can do this 10 times faster than the time I actually spent to do this these days. So that's the task here. And so I'm going to show you how I can do that with NotebookLM now. So something NotebookLM is really good at, I'm noticing from all my experimentation recently, is that it can be used to convert certain formats into other formats. So I have this website and I have my newsletter that's basically like listicles of these top papers, but it's formatted in a very specific way. And what I want to do now is to convert this format here into the Markdown format that I showed you in my GitHub repo. And the whole mission here is to take this one and convert it into Markdown that I can copy and then paste back into my GitHub repo. And that process should be like really fast, should be less than a minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the chat feature for this. So I'm going to go here in chat. The sources are already selected, so this is the only source I'm using. And then here I am going to prompt the system to generate something in Markdown format. So I'm going to say generate the papers in Markdown format. Use the following format. And I have a format that I'm using. All this information I'm going to provide below this video, just in case you want to reproduce what I'm doing here. In fact, I would encourage you to pause the video every now and then to reproduce the examples that I'm showing you throughout the course. Okay, so I pasted the format. This is the format that I'll be using here, or that I want the system to follow. And again, I'm converting to different formats. That's pretty useful. So for this one, I haven't been able to do this using other systems like ChatGPT or Claude, which are systems that I use a lot. Like those are products that I use pretty much every day now. And the reason is because they don't have this scraping functionality. Like they don't have the ability to scrape information like this, like NotebookLM is doing. And because NotebookLM has this as context and it has preserved the links and all of that information, it should be able to convert that into this format. And that's basically the task that I'm giving it. So I'm going to go here and then I'm going to hit enter. And so now it's generating something. So basically, I just gave it the structure that I want, and it should be in Markdown format, something that I can go and paste directly in my GitHub repo. While you may be thinking, okay, so this is just for a specific GitHub repo. No, in fact, you can use it for any kind of formatting that you may want. You may have like a table or any type of format that you may be interested for your domain and use case. So here you go. It's directly converted into a table. And this is now something that I can go and directly paste into GitHub. So I can go and copy this, and I can go and directly paste it. I can actually save this as a note as well. Save this as a note, and you will see that it's saved as a note. Now I know that the links are working because you can see the links there. And now I'm just ready to go and paste this inside of my GitHub repo, and it works. I've tested it already. It works brilliant. I really like the fact that these LLMs are really good at converting data into different formats. That's really powerful. As you can see, in this case, I do use it for my newsletter because I cross-post to different places. This really reduces the amount of work that I do for my newsletter, and I'm excited to keep using it. And I've tested it so many times, and it works. As I mentioned flawlessly in the previous video, I do a lot of science communication. So when I see like a paper, or I see a deep dive discussion on a specific AI topic, I always think about how do I make that very technical content more consumable or more accessible to more people, especially developers and other researchers that are trying to get into the space. That's something I think about, and I work a lot and put a lot of effort into that. In fact, my whole company is doing a lot of work around that to make things more accessible, specifically research and different developments that are happening in the field. As an example, for instance, I really like this prompt engineering deep dive by Anthropic, and I watched the whole video. So it's like a 1 hour plus video where they go through a lot of prompt engineering tips. And these are researchers, product folks, and also customer facing people as well that were discussing this. And they had a lot of really interesting insights into how to better prompt these models. And the talk was titled Prompt Engineering. And so what I was thinking was, how do I use language models to make that kind of content more accessible? I must say that the content is pretty technical and I don't think it's consumable by a lot of people. I think it's mostly going to be folks that already have some insight into how to using LLMs and maybe researchers or hardcore developers. So the idea here is, how do I use something like that discussion, and create a more consumable or accessible version of that? And what format am I going to use for that as well? How do I use LLMs for this? So what I did was I actually took the discussion. The discussion I'm talking about is this YouTube video. I'm going to link it below this video. It's an excellent talk about prompt engineering and how Anthropic is using prompt engineering techniques for building a variety of powerful use cases with language models. What I want to show you is, how do I use NotebookLM to create something like this? So the way I did this was a couple of weeks ago, before I even knew about NotebookLM. I actually did this manually. I created a little project, like this is a web project, where I feed it a YouTube link, and that application downloads the YouTube video, then uses Gemini 1.5 Pro to transcribe the video. And from the transcription, now I can convert it into something like this. So basically summarizing the prompting techniques. But to do this in this format, I actually use Claude, because Claude does tend to perform better for things that are related to creative writing. So notice that I'm using a combination of models. I'm using Gemini 1.5 Pro for the transcription part. I'm using Claude to do the generation of the prompting tips from the transcription. And so this is how I came about this particular list. And people really liked it. You can see here that this tweet had 385,000 views, 5.6K bookmarks, 2.7K likes, and 383. So very viral content. And it's one of my most viral contents in the past couple of weeks. This was all possible through these LLMs. Fast forward 2 weeks or 3 weeks from when I posted this tweet, we have NotebookLM exploding in popularity and super viral. And basically, they introduced a new feature recently where you can upload a YouTube link. So it reminded me exactly of that whole process that I built an application around, and they have basically replicated that feature essentially. And I could not be more excited, because it makes things so much easier for me. Now I can just use that model, and I can use NotebookLM to generate everything that I want to generate in whatever format that I want to generate. So that's what I'm going to show in this section. So I'm inside NotebookLM. I'm going to start a new notebook. And then down here, you see that there is a YouTube feature here. So I can provide a YouTube link. So I'm going to paste the link of the YouTube video that I showed previously. So here is the YouTube link. Some notes here: only the text transcript will be imported at this moment. So this is just a text transcript. There's no access to the actual clips or video or anything like that. Only public YouTube videos are supported, so it has to be in public. Recently uploaded videos may not be available to import. That's something that I saw a lot of folks struggling with. Just be aware of that not every, especially the new videos, is going to be available here. If the upload fails, just check out the Learn More for learning about the common reasons why this might fail. So I'm going to insert the YouTube video here, and now it's uploading. Okay, so now I can click here, and what I get is basically the transcription of this YouTube video. You can see all the transcription here. This was a conversation. So I had a lot of questions about this. How do I convert this into something that's more accessible for a broader audience? Because I felt like it was super technical, and they really went deep. That's what I love about the discussion. I'm going to show you the process on how to generate that content that I showed you for that viral tweet. And it's super simple. Like, you don't have to do all the stuff that I did, where I had to create an application to do the transcription and then to do the actual content generation and so on, and use different models. I can just use one system for that. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to show you how I can generate something that's very similar to that tweet. I'm going to say generate the top 20. In fact, I would say, to be more specific, prompt engineering, because they might be talking about a bunch of different things in the discussion, which they do. So I want this to be very specific. I'm going to hit enter again. I should get a response this time. I believe this error was due to my internet connection, but it should have no problem generating the response now. All right, so here we go. So we get it. And now you can see that it did a great job because it generated 20 items, which is the first thing I want. And then it actually used the format that I specified. So I specified heading and explanation format. All right, so that's looking good. And use 2 sentences max. So I have to check specifically if it went over 2 sentences. It looks like most of them are okay from what I can see. Yeah, most of them are like 1 sentence. Maybe some have 2 sentences, but that looks great. I like this format already. And what could have been improved here is the formatting of the actual content. Like maybe this could have been a list, and maybe it could have used like Markdown to make it easy to read. But that's not a problem because this is the first iteration. Again, I could save this as a note, and you can see here now it's stored as a note, right? And then I can go back to my notebook guide and can go back to view chat, and I have it here. So what I can do here now is I can also look at my citations. So let's look at one of these. Let's see if there's an interesting one. So it says, don't over rely on role prompting. I thought that was a really important insight in this discussion. And it says, while assigning personas can be helpful, it shouldn't replace clear task descriptions and context. That's a very important suggestion and recommendation they made in the discussion. So what we can do here now, we can drill down in the transcript of the YouTube video to learn more about what they were exactly talking about. So I'm going to click on that and click to 14, and you will see that this line in particular is talking about that. It says, you're in this product, so tell me if you are writing an assistant that is in a product, tell me I am in the product. Tell me I'm writing on behalf of this company. I'm embedded in this product. I am the support chat window of that product. You're a language model. You're not a human. That's fine. But just being really prescriptive about the exact context, about where something is being used, I found a lot of that because I guess my concern most often with role prompting is people use it as a shortcut of a similar task they wanted the model to do. So just be more clear and provide better descriptions for the task and provide a better context usually will give you better results as opposed to just relying on this idea of role prompting. That was what the recommendation was about, and I fully agree with this because this has been the case for the experiments and use cases that we have worked on as well. That's really neat, and you can go on and continue looking at the different citations and get the different contexts from the transcript to learn more about what they were discussing. And this is how you learn really fast about certain things. And you can iterate on this. You can follow up with something. You can, for instance, say, how does the role of prompt engineering change with the evolution of language models? And you can really have a lot of fun and learn a lot from just interacting here in NotebookLM with your sources. And YouTube videos as sources is really powerful because there's so much really good educational content on YouTube. So I'm going to call this notebook YouTube Prompt Engineering Tips. Being able to interact with YouTube videos using NotebookLM is a lot of fun and you learn a ton. It's basically what a research assistant should be doing, in my opinion. And I'm having a blast because I do learn a lot from YouTube. And obviously, I also do a lot of YouTube content and I see the importance of that. In this section, what I want to do is I want to continue with that YouTube demonstration. And I want to show you some ideas on things that you can also try. And again, I encourage you to pause the video and try to reproduce all the demonstrations that we're showing you. We're going to provide you all the links to all the sources we have been using and all the prompts and all that good stuff. What I want to do in this section here is I want to be able to use this content in different ways. So I was able to use something like this for that great viral tweet. But I also do technical guides as well. So I have fun doing tweets and so on. But what I tend to do as well with most of the stuff that I learn is I try to also produce technical guides and tutorials for developers and researchers. One popular guide that I've been working on for over a year now is this prompt engineering guide. It's very popular in the community. It gives you tips about how to prompt these models really well. And there's a lot of different techniques and so on. I do update this guide very frequently and it has a lot of really technical content, but it also has a lot of like introduction content as well. So I want to make it as accessible as possible to everyone. So what I want to do with the prompt engineering tips that were generated by NotebookLM on that prompt engineering discussion or YouTube discussion is I want to be able to integrate it into my guide. So in this page specifically, I had general tips for designing prompts, This one has like start simple with your prompt, focus a lot on the instruction, and even have some examples here. The importance of being very specific. We have discussed that as well in this course, but that's something that we discuss in our other courses like related to prompt engineering, which we also have in the academy. Avoid impreciseness, to do or not to do, and so on. So there are like nice little tips there. And in fact, all of those tips that we saw in that YouTube are more recent tips with the more recent models. And that would be nice to kind of integrate here. So the question is, how do I use NotebookLM to integrate those tips into this website or this particular section of the guide? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first have to integrate this. So I want to integrate this into NotebookLM, so NotebookLM has context into what I want it to do, what I want it to update, and how it should update this page. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to copy over the URL for this page into NotebookLM. So I have the page link. I'm going to go here, go to website, and here's the link to that specific guide that I just showed you. So I'm going to insert it. So you can see I'm mixing up all of these sources. I'm using the chat. I'm using all of these different functionalities. And that's what I encourage you to do, to experiment and just be creative with all these features. Just to recap, the goal of this, just to recap, what I want to do here is I want to be able to use or integrate these prompt engineering tips from this discussion and write a summary of it and integrate it into my prompt engineering guide. That's the goal here. So how do I do this in NotebookLM? So I have my sources here. I'm going to go back to Notebook Guide. It has the two sources, but when I select and want to use this note, it says one note. So I'm assuming that it's only using that note and it's not using the sources. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this note here and I'm actually going to copy this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a source, copy text, and then paste it here. So I'm going to insert it. Now it's added as a source. So I'm going to rename this source into prompt engineering tips. So now I have it here as a source. So I have it as a note, but I also have it as a source explicitly. I know the three sources are being selected and I can now chat with those three sources. And so what I'm going to ask the model here is a bit more complex. So let's see how it does it in the first iteration. So this is what I'm going to prompt it. Help me to integrate the prompt engineering tips into my current prompting guide, general tips, so that the model knows that this is the one I'm talking about that I want to integrate into. I'm just going to prompt it like that. And then one more thing I want to add here is please use a format that's ideal for my prompting guide. I'll let the model figure it out. Again, these models are very creative, so you can sort of try to prompt them this way to see how creative they are and if they can actually achieve the task. Don't be afraid to prompt the model this way. This is a format that's ideal for my prompting guide. All right, I'm going to hit send here, and now we wait a bit. All right, so this is what it's recommending. So you can see here are the top 20 prompt engineering tips from our conversation history. So it's using the history, formatted for inclusion in your prompting guide. And then it says clear communication, iterate and experiment, anticipate edge cases, and so on. So here is the conversation that they were having, and then employ the model itself to create diverse and realistic examples for a few-shot prompting scenarios. So this is for a few-shot prompting, how you might improve that, and it used this particular text. I can see that the model is trying to provide this additional context here, but that code might not be needed when I'm actually trying to include this in my guide. So I can further improve this. But I like that it tries to format things really nicely here and tries to summarize things for me, because I think these ones are already pretty good and I can already use them in my prompting guide. I don't really need the code. What I probably could use is some examples. So maybe I can spend a little bit more time trying to come up with examples or actually ask the model to produce examples. So I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you to try to figure out. I'm going to provide other links below the video. So for you to test this will be your exercise. I'm very pleased with this, especially because it tried to format things really nicely here this time. And now the only thing that's missing is to actually come up with examples as is shown in my guide. So in my guide, you will see that there are some prompt examples and some examples of the output. So that is what I want them all to do. I might actually be able to take an example of this and then add it right here in the prompt itself. And something that you can also try is maybe get creative with the nodes so you can actually convert this into a node and then just use the nodes to be able to generate the format that you want. So that's a way to kind of constrain the model even further so that it doesn't look at the sources and gets confused about what you want to do, because I think it can happen that it will get confused about the task itself because it's looking at so much information in context. And again, with these models, they do struggle with longer and longer context. So by kind of tuning this and putting it in nodes and making more specific about what is the content that you want to apply some transformation on, I think you can get better results. Those are things that you can try. Anyways, that will be it for this section. I think the YouTube feature is very powerful and you should be definitely experimenting with this. I did this webinar on building advanced applications with LLMs. So some of the slides are a little bit outdated. So there are a few things I want to be able to do with these slides. So I want to be able to, for instance, reuse it to prepare a special lesson for some students that have been asking me, how do they apply some of the concepts that I was introducing or I was talking about in this presentation? So for instance, prompting technique, how do you apply them? How do you apply this concept of React agent? What are the sort of use cases as well, and so on. I would love to be able to use NotebookLM to come up with quizzes and to be able to generate different artifacts like notes, additional notes that I can provide to students to be able to study all these advanced concepts related to large language models. Providing quizzes, suggesting exercises as well that I can provide students. So that's what I'm going to be using NotebookLM for. Note that I did this presentation using Google Slides. You can add Google Slides as a source in NotebookLM. So we're going to be using that in this section. So I'm going to start a new notebook here. Select this notebook. And then I'm going to select Google Slides. And then I'm going to go to Shared with Me. So this is the presentation that I shared between my accounts. So make sure you have access to that presentation before you upload it as a source. So if I go to it, you will see that all the slides are here. So what I can do from here is I could do a couple of things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to generate an audio overview of this presentation. There might be a few things that I'm forgetting from the presentation because I did this presentation like a couple of months ago. So I want to recap. And that's an excellent use case for audio overview. So I can go and hit generate here. So now the audio overview is generating. So here is an audio overview now of the lecture. So now I can go and play it.
All right, so you've been digging into Elvis Saravia's presentation, building advanced applications with LLMs. Seems like you're ready to move past just chatting with chatbots.
Yeah, this is different. It's more like using LLMs to build really complex systems, not just asking for a poem.
Definitely next level. And from the looks of these slides, we're going to cover it all. Advanced prompting techniques, the tools you need, even React agents and RE systems. So whether you're prepping for a big meeting on LLMs or you want to build your own application or just curious about this stuff, this deep dive is for you.
That's what the presentation is about, as you can see in the slides right here. So that's a good way to get a recap of content that you may have worked on a long time ago and you just need to review it. All right, assuming I have reviewed this and I already know what I want to do here, what I can do now is I can try to add quizzes. So the main goal of this use case is that I want to use the slides and I want to improve the lecture. And I want to add quizzes. I want to use NotebookLM to suggest exercises, and so forth, and be able to generate other artifacts like notes that I can share with my students. So let's get started with that. So the first one is I'm going to add a quiz. So I can go here. This is already selected, and I can prompt it. Can you add a multiple choice quiz for slide 10? So I'm going to focus on slide 10 along with the correct answers. And what is slide 10? Let's look at that. So you can see here that slide 10 is about external tools and retrieval systems. So I want to add a multiple choice just to see if students can better understand it. So this is something I'm going to add to the presentation itself. We can go and generate that now, and we will double check whether things are working correctly here. So I'm going to keep this open. Okay, so that was fast. And we can see here a multiple choice quiz based on slide 10 along with the correct answers. So question 1, what is the purpose of external tools and retrieval systems when working with LLMs? A, to generate creative text formats like poems, code, scripts, and so on. B, to enhance the capabilities and reliability of LLMs. C, to provide a visual representation of data for better understanding. And D, to store and manage large datasets for LLM training. So the correct answer for this is B, to enhance the capabilities and reliability of LLMs. This is something I mentioned here. So that's a nice quiz. That's something that I could add as a follow-up here, just to keep the class engaging when I'm delivering the presentation or lecture. And we have a few more examples here, question 2, question 3, and we can keep generating this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. This is really useful already. And then I'm going to give it a name, quiz for external tools and LLMs. It's good to be naming things explicitly because that way you can find it easily. And also it gave me a citation. Just want to check that. You can see that it's citing the slide itself. So it has a good understanding of the slides and where exactly those slides are located. All right, so the next one that I want to do here is I actually want to generate some quick notes for slide 15. So this slide 15 is basically summarizing how you should approach prompt engineering. When do you use chain of thought? When do you use agentic workflow, and how does it all make sense in a pipeline? Like if you're following and you're working in a use case with LLMs, first you do zero-shot prompting, and then you go through these different steps. And then eventually you want to maybe build a RAG depending on whether you are optimizing context or you want to apply fine-tuning if you want to refine the style and tone of the outputs of the LLMs. So I want to ask the model to generate more detailed notes for this because this might not be enough for the students, right? They look at it, they're like a little bit confused. I've added a few things here and there, but if I add this in a note version, it might be super useful for students. So I want to actually generate that artifact. So I'm going to go here, as I've been doing, and then I'm going to say, can you write a detailed explanation to slide 15? I can just tell it whichever slide. This is the cool thing about supporting slides here in NotebookLM, right? So I'm going to go here and then say send. I'm going to send that to Gemini, and Gemini is going to do its magic. All right, here we go. So these are the notes for the explanation to slide 15. Starts with the basics, prompt engineering. So you can see even categorizing and doing headlines here. This is nice. And you can see that it's saying zero-shot prompt. So it has good understanding of this figure. This is very impressive because it has an understanding of the text. It has an understanding of what content I'm talking about. And it also has an understanding of the figures inside the slides. That's a very powerful feature that I think has a lot of potential, and you can see how I'm using it already. It says zero-shot prompt is not enough, then use few-shot prompt. For even better performance, you may use many-shot prompt and so on. You can see it saying exemplars 50 to 100, and I mentioned that somewhere. You can see the citation there. And then it says incorporating reasoning and text, right? That's chain of thought. And then advanced techniques, agentic workflows for fine-tuning, and so on. And fine-tuning, and then retrieval augmented generation. So these are nice notes, right? They're more comprehensive and more detailed compared to what I have here. And I think NotebookLM did a great job at summarizing all of this. Now, I'm going to save this as well. So now it's saved as notes. So I'm going to say optimizing LLM performance notes. So I have the quizzes. I have the notes. And the last thing I want to do here is I want to create exercises. In particular, I want to create an exercise for this table here. This table is talking about prompting techniques and when to use it. So I want to create a nice quiz here because I want students to understand when they should apply each of these techniques. So I'm going to prompt it here. I want to build an exercise on the prompting techniques mentioned. I'm not going to mention the slide this time. And I'm going to say, can you please help with some creative exercises for the students to work on? See here, I'm testing not only the capability of NotebookLM to look at the content and be able to read the information in the table, which are the prompting techniques, but on top of that, it should be able to do creative tasks for me, which in this case is to create exercises for the students to work on. And in this case, I did not give it a slide number. This one doesn't have a slide number, so it should still be able to pick it up because it has it in context. All right, here we go. So it says, here are some creative exercises for students to work on based on the prompting techniques mentioned in the sources. Zero-shot prompting exercise. Ask students to develop zero-shot prompts for a variety of tasks such as translation, summarizing factual facts. I really like that. Few-shot prompting exercise provides students with examples of few-shot prompts and then ask them to identify the examples used to steer the model. That's nice because then students can reason about the few-shot examples, which is really important when designing that. Chain of thought as well, some exercises there. There's one for React as well. This one says, present students with a task that requires an LLM to interact with external tools. Ask them to design a React agent that can effectively solve the task by reasoning about the information needed and deciding which actions to take. Use appropriate tools such as search engines or APIs. combining the retrieved information with its reasoning to generate the final answer. And then there's also one for RAG here. So you can see that it gives me some examples. Maybe it lacks specificity, but maybe if I can provide it more context and examples, it can do a better job. But this is already great. And so I'm going to save this because I have some ideas on how I might want to use this already. So this one, I'm going to name this exercises to understand prompt engineering. There we go. Techniques. All right. That's done. Great. So that's basically what I want to show you, how to integrate slides. NotebookLM has good understanding of images, figures, tables, and the entire slide deck. And you can use that to do things like exercises, creating notes for students, adding quizzes as well. This is awesome because now the students can use this to continue building on their knowledge. And I can use this to improve my lectures and my courses. So this is another excellent way on how you can use NotebookLM. You have made it to the end of this course. We spoke about NotebookLM, how amazing it is for unlocking all sorts of use cases where you can leverage AI-powered research assistants. We used it for doing more extensive research on topics that we were interested in, such as AlphaChip. We use it for analyzing papers. We also use it for marketing-related tasks, such as summarizing the newsletter using audio overviews, which is an incredible feature that has so much potential, and I think everyone should be experimenting with. We also went through a YouTube example where we provided NotebookLM with a YouTube video, and we engaged with that video, converted it into nice, digestible, and accessible format, which NotebookLM is really good at. We also covered this idea of adding slides as a source and the ability of NotebookLM to understand figures, tables, and be able to create artifacts for our students to keep learning about the wonderful world of large language models. So we generated quizzes, notes, and exercises as well. And we're just getting started. So hopefully you are inspired to go and try out NotebookLM for personal use or in your professional life. And we hope that you find it as useful and fun as we are finding this for our own company and our own use cases. NotebookLM, I think, is in its early phases. It's actually labeled as an experimental product by Google. So that means there's going to be a lot of features that are going to be added in the future. And I think those features are coming really fast. And as you saw during the course, there are certain limitations, and that's because this product is in its early phase. So for instance, we wanted the ability to steer the audio overviews. I think that would be a powerful feature, and maybe that's something that's coming in the future. We also want to be able to do better with the YouTube citations. So for instance, if we can be able to better extract information from YouTube videos, such as extracting clips or something like that, that'll be amazing. So far, you can only engage with the transcript of the YouTube video, but if you can engage with the clips directly, I think that could really be powerful and can unlock amazing use cases with NotebookLM. Agentic workflows could also be powerful here. As you saw, we were able to scrape information. It already has that capability of scraping information. But I think what would be even more interesting is the ability to use external tools like a database, for instance, or make a connection to a data warehouse, or the ability to create an agent that can search the web for information. So that whole process is automated while ensuring that the integrity of the experience is not obviously compromised, because I think the ability to verify information, the fact that NotebookLM rarely hallucinates is very powerful, and I love it for all the work that I do. And there are other features such as having like prompt templates, for instance, or maybe the ability to generate even more complex and more creative reformatted actions. Those will also be interesting. But overall, I'm very happy and have been using NotebookLM a lot over the last few days, and I'm very excited about where this goes. Again, congrats on completing the course, and hopefully we will see you all in one of our other courses.